And good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are around the world. I am Marcus Holmes, and I am the facilitator of the Love and Stuff community, and we are excited that you are here. Whether you are watching with us on LinkedIn Live, on Twitch TV, on YouTube events, or on Facebook on our homepage, the Love and Stuff page, or the Marcus R. Holmes page, we're excited to have you here with us this evening, afternoon, morning, depending on where you're watching. And did you know that less than 2% of registered architects are African American? And did you know that less than 0.4% of registered architects are African American female? When I heard that fact, it kind of blew my mind, but I'm not altogether surprised. But I want to share with you as we open this week, our final week of Black History Month moments for this month. Of course, Darren Williams, who was with us yesterday and who will be with us again on Tuesday, reminded us that Black History starts January 1st and ends December 31st of every year. But we set aside 28 days in a month, right? To honor the accomplishments, the brilliance, the sacrifices, the harrowing experiences of African Americans and those persons of African descent. And 28 days are just not enough, but we felt obliged in the Love and Stuff community to obligated to come forward with the stories and experiences of our forefathers and ancestors and those who have and are paving the way for those of us to come and experience the great American melting pot and to better our world. And so we will highlight some of the accomplishments of some of the standout African American architects, but we couldn't name them all, who have paved the way for younger architects, some of which I know and am thinking of this evening, who are standing on the shoulders, standing forward on the shoulders of great men and women in this space. And so all week long, we will talk about architects, architecture, buildings, and we will also talk about the arts and certain genres of the art, including music, that we will celebrate this week as we come to a close of the month. And on Sunday, February 28th, 1 week from today, at 6:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will close out our celebration with a wonderful culmination of members of the Love and Stuff community who will share various areas from tap dance to acting and music. You will get a chance to witness some of our great reflections of those that have come before us. So I'm going to share some highlights of some African Americans, and hopefully we will be able to show a few of their photos of some of their work. And some of our information is from the Architectural Digest, from the archives of Ebony magazines, and other sources. In many ways, design today is treated as avenue to inclusion. Architects beautify and reconceptualize affordable housing, devise public spaces that bring art out of galleries into the masses, and create environmentally conscious structures to preserve our planet's dwindling resources. Likewise, the set creating such design is diversifying, but the process is and was far from organic, as is the case with most necessary stepping stones on the way to progress. Individual boundary pushers are vital, those willing to disrupt convention and welcome the spotlight, if not only for themselves. African Americans were long barred from the architectural profession. From the higher education institutions that granted degrees to the firms that excluded based on race alone. Today's African American architects and designers did not arrive by wave of a wand or even, as the conventional narrative would say, gradual progress. For this, we thank controversial Supreme Court rulings, schools willing to take and make exceptions, and the most essential, driven and unafraid Black students, unafraid to tolerate a swarm of flashbulbs on their first day of classes or graduate without the support of the trade itself. Though laws regarding segregation have since evolved, architecture is still often fairly critiqued for its homogeneous makeup. So we highlight a few of the trailblazers that have left a mark on the built world for years to come. Norma Larick, 1926 to 2012, once called the Rosa Parks of architecture by the American Institute of Architecture. She overcame racism and sexism, to become the first licensed Black female architect in New York City in 1954, the first Black female member of the AIA in 1959, the first licensed Black female architect in California in 1962, the first Black female fellow of the AIA in 1980, and co-founder of the nation's largest woman-owned architecture firm, Siegel, Larick and Diamond, and the first Black woman to co-own an architecture firm in 1985. As an architecture student at Barnard College and Columbia University, she was one of two women and the only Black student in her 1950 class, and upon graduation was passed over for several jobs. She once quoted in a newspaper as saying, quote, "They weren't hiring women or African Americans, and I didn't know which it was working against me," unquote. She landed a role with the Department of Public Services, then at Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, and then Gruen's Associates in Los Angeles, California. She collaborated often with Cesar Pelli on iconic structures such as the Pacific Design Center, which I hope to be able to show you momentarily, and the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, before co-founding her own practice with Margot Siegel and Catherine Diamond. Quote, "Architecture should be working on improving the environment of people in their homes, in their places of work, and in their places of recreation," unquote, she said of the practice. "It should be functional and pleasant, not just in the image of the ego of the architect." So I hope to show you one of her designs, which again is the Pacific Design Center that she collaborated with Cesar Pelli. I'll bring that up in just a moment. All right. It should come right on up. And that is the Pacific Design Center. John S. Chase, 1925 to 2012. On a hot June day in 1950, Associated Press photographers clamored around a 25-year-old John S. Chase as he waited in line at the University of Texas at Austin. One of the first two African Americans to enroll in the school's architecture program, just 2 days after the Supreme Court ruled to desegregate professional and graduate schools, Chase was already making history, even if, to him, this was merely an exciting step in his professional life. Chase went on to become the first Black architect to be licensed in Texas and began his own practice after receiving rejections from the white-owned firms in the area. Known for modern designs and democratic public spaces, notably churches, some of Chase's most well-known projects include River National Bank, the first Black-owned banking institution in the state of Texas, the U.S. Embassy in Tunisia, the Martin Luther King Jr. School of Humanities at Texas Southern University, and the Phillips House Residence in East Austin. To promote the work of people of color in architecture and design, Chase founded the National Organization of Minority Architects in 1971. And I definitely want to share the Martin Luther King Jr. School of Humanities that was designed by him. Okay, King Jr. School of Humanities. Okay, I'm going to share my screen for that. This is the Martin Luther King Jr. School of Humanities at Texas Southern University, designed by John Chase. Robert R. Taylor, 1968 to 1942. 1868 to 1942. Born in Wilmington, North Carolina, a 20-year-old Robert R. Taylor traveled to Boston to sit for the MIT entrance exam, determined to study at the University School of Architecture. 4 years after passing the test, he became the first academically trained Black architect and the school's first Black graduate. During his course of study, he met Booker T. Washington, who later recruited Taylor to lead the industrial program and campus expansion at his Tuskegee Institute, an African-American vocational school in Alabama that is now a designated National Historical Site. Over his lifetime as an educator and architect, Taylor designed more than 25 buildings on the Tuskegee campus, including Washington's own home, as well as libraries, housing, museums, and other academic buildings in North Carolina, South Carolina, Ohio, Arkansas, Mississippi, Virginia, Tennessee, and in Liberia. And I will show you a picture of the Booker T. Washington home that was designed by Robert Taylor. And here is the home designed by Robert Taylor for Booker T. Washington on Tuskegee's campus. Beverly Lorraine Green, 1915 to 1957. A 27-year-old architect, engineer, and urban planner, Beverly Lorraine Green became the first Black female architect licensed in the United States in Illinois in 1942. She started her practice in Chicago, However, when racial prejudice caused her to be often passed over for projects and ignored by the media, she moved to New York City to work, ironically, on the town housing project. In 1945, it did not allow African Americans to live in its apartments. She would go on to push past further barriers, working with some of the most well known international modernists on iconic structures, with Edward Durrell Stone on the Sarah Lawrence College Arts Complex and Marcel Breuer on the UNESCO headquarters in Paris. In her final project, she designed several buildings for New York University, but died before she saw their completion. And I will show you a picture of the UNESCO headquarters in Paris, designed by Beverly Lorraine Green. It's more an aerial shot, but it gives you a good idea of the structure. UNESCO headquarters in Paris, designed by Beverly Lorraine Green. John Warren Mutasimi, 1922 to 1995. After graduating from the Illinois Institute of Technology in 1948, where he studied under Mies van der Rohe, John Warren Mutasimi began a fruitful architecture career in the greater Chicago area. One of Mutasimi's most highly profile commissions was the headquarters for Black publishing titan John H. Johnson's growing media empire, which included Ebony and Jet magazines. Inside the stone-clad structure, colorful walls and psychedelic carpets exuded energy, celebrating Black culture and commerce. Today, it remains the only downtown Chicago tower designed by an African American. The city landmark, still known to many as the Johnson Publishing Building, is currently undergoing a conversion into rental apartments, though the emblematic, Ebony Jet signage will remain or has remained. And I will show you a picture of this. Of this building, the Johnson Publishing Building. Okay. Right, here's a picture of the Johnson Publishing Building. Designed by John Warren Mutasimi. Moses McKissick III was born in 1879 and died in 1952. The grandsons of a trained builder, Moses McKissick III and his brother Calvin, followed in family footsteps. After studying architecture via correspondence courses, the Tennessee-born siblings became the first, Moses, and second, Calvin, Black architects licensed in their home state in 1922. Together, they formed McKissick and McKissick, the nation's first Black-owned architecture firm, and the oldest still in operation today. At first, most of the firm's projects were churches or church-based. However, In 1942, they won a multi-million dollar federal contract to design the Tuskegee Army Airfield, the largest project that had been awarded a Black-owned firm to that date. Today, the family-owned firm is known for its design and construction management, recently for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, designed by British architect Dave Adjaye. And I will show a picture of that building as well. And here is a picture of that African American Museum of History and Culture, designed by the first Black-owned architecture firm. Vertner Wooden Tandy, 1885 to 1949. For Lexington, Kentucky-born Vertner Woodson Tandy, design ran in the family. His father was a respected mason whose firm built his hometown courthouse, among other prominent structures. After attending the Chandler School and the Tuskegee Institute, Tandy matriculated into Cornell to study architecture, where he was a founding member of the nation's oldest African American fraternity. He would soon become the first Black architect registered in New York State, where his landmark structures included the 1910 St. Philip's Episcopal Church in Harlem, the first Black Episcopal Church in New York, and the second in the United States, which he designed with his firm partner, George Washington Foster, the first Black architect registered in New Jersey. And I would love to show it as well, showing it as well. This is the first Black Episcopal Church in New York, the St. Philip's Episcopal Church on West 134th Street. And here is the church. Thank you, those that are tuning in. I see J. Gerald Harvey, our senior associate producer, Howard Moore, Mahassan Pierce. Thank you all. Thank you, those on LinkedIn and YouTube events as well. Now I'd like to share a little bit of a spotlight on another Black architect, Paul R. Williams. He was a fellow of the American Institute of Architecture, born February 18th, 1894, died on January 23rd, 1980. He was an American architect based in Los Angeles, California. He practiced mostly in Southern California and designed the homes of numerous celebrities. He also designed many public and private buildings. He came from a family of middle-class Memphis residents, Chester Stanley and Lila Wright Williams. They migrated to Los Angeles in 1893 with their son Chester to start a fruit business, but were not successful. Paul was born in Los Angeles on February 18th, 1894. His father died in 1896 from tuberculosis, and his mother 2 years later from the same illness, leaving the boys in foster care. He was eventually adopted by C.I. Clarkson and his wife. Williams was the only African American student in his elementary school. He studied at the Los Angeles School of Art and Design and at the Los Angeles branch of the New York Beaux Arts Institute of Design at Adler, subsequently working as a landscape architect with Wilbur Cook Jr. He studied architectural engineering from 1916 to 1919 at the University of Southern California, where he earned his degree, designing several residential buildings while a student there. Williams became a certified architect in California in 1921 and the first certified African-American architect west of the Mississippi. He married Della Mae Gibbons on June 27, 1917, at the First AME Church in Los Angeles. They had 3 children: Paul Revere, who died as an infant, Marilyn Frances Williams, and Norma Louise Williams. Williams won an architectural competition at age 25 and 3 years later opened his own office. Known as an outstanding draftsman, he perfected the skill of rendering drawings upside down. This skill was developed because in the 1920s, many of his white clients felt uncomfortable sitting directly next to a Black man. He learned to draft upside down so that he could sit across the desk from his clients who would see his drafts right side up. Struggling to gain attention, he served on the first Los Angeles City Planning Commission in 1920. From 1921 through 1924, Williams worked for Los Angeles architect John C. Austin, eventually becoming chief draftsman before establishing his own office. In 1923, Williams became the first African-American member of the American Institute of Architects. In 1939, he won the AIA Award of Merit for his design of the MCA building in Beverly Hills, now the headquarters of the Paradigm Talent Agency. At one point in his career, Williams became interested in prefabricated structures. He worked together with Wallace Neff to design experimental airform structures, which were small homes that took only a few days to construct using simple materials. Quincy Jones was an architect who claimed to have hired Williams and later collaborated with him on projects in Palm Springs, including the Palm Springs Tennis Club and the Town and Country and Romanoff's on the Rocks restaurants. A Quincy Jones, not the Quincy Jones. Lockheed and Gurdon Industries recruited Williams to design a concept for a car alternative travel system in Las Vegas. He developed the idea of a monorail-like system called the Skylift Maxi Club that would bring people to and from McCarran Airport and the city center. During World War II, Williams worked for the Navy Department as an architect. During his career, he designed over 2,000 buildings. In 1951, Williams won the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Man of the Year Award. And in 1953, he received the Spingarn Medal from the NAACP for his outstanding contributions as an architect and member of the African American community. He was bestowed honorary doctorates from Lincoln University of Missouri, Howard University, and the Tuskegee Institute. In 1956, he won an award for service from Wisdom magazines for contributions to knowledge and distinguished service to mankind. In 1957, he became the first Black member to be inducted into the AIA's College of Fellows. And April 2nd, 1957, letter from the executive secretary of AIA offered Williams the honor of fellowship and membership in the College of Fellows for, quote, your notable contribution in public service. In his essay, I Am a Negro, published in the American Magazine in 1937, he writes, quote, I came to realize that I was being condemned not by lack of ability, but by my color. I passed through successive stages of bewilderment, inarticulate protest, resentment, and finally reconciliation to the status of my race. Eventually, however, as I grew older and thought more clearly, I found in my condition an incentive to personal accomplishment and inspiring challenge. Without having the wish to show them, I developed a fierce desire to show myself. I wanted to vindicate every ability I had. I wanted to acquire new abilities. I wanted to prove that I, as an individual, deserved a place in the world, unquote. Williams designed more than 2,000 private homes, most of which were in the Hollywood Hills in the mid-Wilshire portion of Los Angeles, including his own home in Lafayette Square. He also designed at least one home in the San Rafael district, along with many others in Pasadena and La Cañada, Flint Ridge. His most famous homes were for celebrities, and he was well regarded for his mastery of various architectural styles. Modern interpretations of Tudor Revival, French Chateau, Regency, French country, and Mediterranean architecture were all within his vernacular. One notable home, the J. Paley House, which he designed for J. Paley in Holmby Hills, and later the residence of Baron Hilton, was used as the Colby Mansion in exterior scenes for the Colby's television series. Williams' client list included Frank Sinatra, the notorious Push Button House, Bill Bojangles Robinson, Lon Chaney, Lucille Ball, Julie London, Tyrone Power, Barbara Stanwyck, Charles Correll, William Hayes, and Danny Thomas, among many others. He famously remarked upon the bitter irony of the fact that most of the homes he designed and whose constructions he oversaw were on parcels whose deeds included segregation covenants, barring Black people from purchasing them. In 1955, Williams was hired to transform a W.W. Woolworth store at the corner of Broad and 45th in Los Angeles into the Broadway Federal Savings and Loan. When the bank opened, Williams safeguarded much of his business papers in the bank. During the fires that consumed the area after the Rodney King trial in 1992, the Broadway Bank burned, and it was feared that much of Williams' archives had been lost. Williams' family had carefully curated the documents, and Williams' granddaughter, Karen Elise Hudson, agreed to the acquisition of the archive by the Getty Research Institute and the USC School of Architecture. In June 2020, Milton Curry of USC announced the contents of the archive: about 35,000 architectural plans, 10,000 original drawings, blueprints, photographs, and correspondence that help fill the gaps of Los Angeles modernism in the 20th century. Williams retired from his practice in 1973, and on January 23rd, 1980, passed away from complications of diabetes. His funeral was held at the first AME church he designed, and the presiding minister, Reverend Cecil Murray, was joined in the pulpit by Dr. William H.D. Hornaday, the senior minister of Founders Church of Religious Science that Williams also had designed. Della Williams survived her famous husband by 16 years, living to the age of 100. Her funeral was held at Founders Church of Religious Science, also designed by her husband, interred in the Williams crypt alongside him in Inglewood Park Cemetery, Inglewood. And I do want to show just one of the homes. There are many homes. I may do a collage and let that be a rotating piece that we show in history, because again, only 2% of architects today, or the last 2019 was the last information I saw, only 2% of registered architects are African American, and 0.4% of those architects are African American female. So I do want to show you one of the, that is the picture of Paul Williams. Let's see if I can find one of the homes. There it is. This was the Baron, a part of the Baron Hilton home. Inclusive of the swimming pool area. Here's a part of that home. We will have to make a collage of many of the homes that he designed just so that you can see the detail. And imagine that this was a person who would do his sketches upside down so that his white clients could see them right side up. What amazing ingenuity. And that is our Black History Moment for today. We have 7 days left in this month. We're here every evening at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with a Black History Moment. If you've enjoyed any of these moments or all of them, I hope that you will click share, whether you are on LinkedIn Live, YouTube events, Facebook, or Twitch TV, to share some of the excellence and brilliance, some of the harrowing details and struggles of persons of African American and African descent. I'm Marcus Holmes. This has been a Black History Month moment, and we will see you tomorrow at 7:00 p.m. Don't forget, Sunday, February 28th, closes out our Black History celebration, and we will close it out at 6:00 p.m. across all platforms with an outstanding presentation that will include oration, dramatization, music, and video. You don't want to miss it. Share now.